Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes' Illuminati, the man who rules the world, takes on the head of the global elite in this all-new action-packed John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes' Illuminati in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. One of my viewers believes that men should no longer use the term beta male to describe males who are submissive to female authority figures. Now, this viewer believes that the term beta male is a pejorative that shouldn't be used by men who talk about men's issues, and believes that we shouldn't use that term beta male to describe males who are looking to submit to female authority figures and participate in a pattern of dysfunctional behavior, because women can use the term beta male to express their hatred for men in a passive-aggressive way. Now, the viewer believes that men in places that talk about men's issues should use the term damaged men to talk about these males who fall into the pattern of beta male behavior, and believes that we should call them damaged men because they fall victim to circumstances that they were born into, whether or not they can change these circumstances, and believe that this is a better term to describe these men. Now, when it comes to these beta males, I believe that we have to continue using the clinical term that was used to define them, because that's all part of social science, and the whole term damaged men basically is coming from a place of political correctness, that's meant to appease women who are a part of the whole gynocentric system that has led to the social engineering of the beta male. Now, when it comes to the whole beta male definition, this is a definition that came out of psychology, and this is the term that is used by those who are into psychology to describe these kinds of males and the pattern and of behavior that they participate in. Because if you go to university studies, they talk about beta males, and they talk about beta males as related to this pattern of behavior, and that's the reason why I use the term beta male in books like I write, like The Man Crisis, because I want people to understand that this is the clear medical definition for this pattern of behavior. Now, when it comes to these kinds of males, they have had other names in the past, and the name that they originally had in the past was, back before the feminist movement, they were called soft males, or they were called nice guys. Now, these soft males or nice guys, they were the exception to men in societies for centuries of history, and they were the exception because most boys were raised with a father in the home, and the father would not allow his boy to be raised to become soft, because a soft man was considered to be a weak man in society, and he was considered to be a weak person in society because people would not see him as a strong masculine man who could stand up for himself and lead in situations. No, he was a guy who would basically follow in situations, submit to female authority figures, and he was not a man who was respected in social circles. However, during the rise of the feminist movement that was socially engineered by the wealthy, we started to see the whole way we raised boys to become men completely changed. And as feminists were given power by the wealthy, what they wanted to do was redefine manhood and masculinity, and the wealthy wanted to redefine manhood and masculinity because they wanted to maintain their wealth base. So what they wanted to do over the last 60 years is socially engineer a kinder, gentler, softer male. And this is what they did as they looked to break up the American family by instituting things like no-fault divorce. And as they implemented no-fault divorce and created the family court system, this is what led to the social engineering of the beta male inside of these single mother households and divorced households. And this boy was supposed to be better than his father, better than his father in that he was supposed to be more emotional, more sensitive to a woman's needs, and more in tune with everything as related to things that are softer. Unfortunately, when it comes to this male, he has a hard time navigating life, and he has a hard time navigating life because he has been socialized to behave like a woman and act like a woman and submit to female authority figures. And as he has been socially engineered to be this kinder, gentler, softer male that is supposed to be more emotional, more sensitive, more in tune with his feelings, he winds up becoming an individual who cannot function in life because the way the world works for men is completely different than it does for women. Because the way the world works for men is that it's completely different because the way a man survives in the world is different than a woman, and the expectations of the world on a man are different than a woman. But the beta male doesn't understand this due to the dysfunctional way he is raised, and due to the dysfunctional way that he is raised, he basically doesn't understand that the world is not catered to him, that he has to actually go out into the world and basically struggle and work to build himself up. This is something he doesn't get from the gynocentric environments of his single mother households or divorced households or these gynocentric environments like public schools. They never teach him the male life skills and male survival skills he needs to know in order to survive in the world. And because of this, he winds up on a road where he winds up becoming more and more dysfunctional because he's trying to make the world work the way it does for women when the world works completely different for men. And that's why the term damaged men doesn't really work for me, because these men basically are not damaged at all. They were deliberately designed to be like this. No, they were deliberately designed to be this kind of male because the wealthy and feminists wanted to create and socially engineer a male who was softer, a male who was weaker, a male they could control, and they wound up in this situation deliberately because the wealthy and feminists want that man in that submissive position, and that's why these men are in the submissive position, because this is done by design. And since it's done by design, it's basically a defect that is socially engineered, and that's why the term beta male is a much more, fitting term, and it's a much more fitting term because according to God's order, a man is supposed to be the head of household. A man is supposed to be the leader, and he is supposed to be as related to being a steward on earth, the alpha as the leader, because he is the steward of God and the head of the family. And when that man is put into a submissive position, he has been put into a beta position by the wealthy and corporate America, and that male has been put into that position again artificially, and that's why he's called a beta male by those in places like the institutions of psychology and mental health. And he's called a beta male because, again, this is a clinical term to describe a pattern of behavior that was artificially designed and socially engineered into the minds of men, a pattern of behavior that was socially engineered and designed into the pattern of men that basically has them on a dysfunctional road. And again, this pattern is one that can be broken by a boy winding up involved with groups of actual healthy men, and can be broken out of this paradigm. So these men are not damaged at all. No, they are deliberately designed to be like this, and that's why these men are what I call men in crisis in my book, The Man Crisis. These men are wired like this by their mothers and by our institutions like corporate America, Madison Avenue, and Hollywood, to be this kinder, gentler, softer male and follow this pattern of behavior that they are shown in things like their households and the teaching environments of female teachers, and shown in media like many of the teen movies that we grew up with in the 80s and still today, where you have the nice guy out here pining for the beautiful girl who is involved with the bad guy, following dysfunctional patterns of behavior that are socially engineered to make these men believe that they're victims and not follow a pattern where they understand that life is hard, life is tough. You're going to have to deal with a lot of people saying no. You're going to have to deal with a lot of rejection. But a man has to build his discipline and resolve because the world is made harder for you. And that was shown in the Bible, where God said that the man would have to till and do hard labor. And in order to survive, I mean, these are things that are principles of manhood, but because corporate America and feminists don't want men to have their power as a man, they told generations of boys they didn't need this power and put them in this beta position, so that they could maintain their power base and their wealth base and their infrastructure for making money. They do this because they don't want to deal with actual men who are out here competing and have to deal with actual competition, because one of the reasons why they socially engineered this softer male is because they didn't want there to be competition, and they didn't want there to be competition because when you have men competing, those who are wealthy cannot stay in power, because in order for an economy to grow, you need to have men out here creating innovations, creating inventions, and building wealth. And again, wealth bases change from generation to generation, but what's happened here is people want to maintain an artificial position that can only be maintained if those men are at the bottom of the world, and those men, if they're under the women, then you don't have to worry about competition. And again, as long as the man is in the beta position and submitted to women, many of the wealthy and the feminists don't have to worry about men taking any sort of power or building any sort of competing enterprise. That's what is designed as related to this. And again, this is not a pejorative term. This is a term that is, again, clinically describes these individuals and describes their clear pattern of behavior and their paradigm of behavior that leads to them winding up becoming complete failures in life. So this whole idea of changing the term to damaged men doesn't really work logically, because if you want to change it just because women are using it, that basically is part of showing that this is coming from a position of weakness. Because if it's not about changing the definition to say that this person's pattern of behavior is one that comes from a medical term as related to the pattern of behavior, then it doesn't work at all. Because again, changing the term beta male doesn't really change the pattern of behavior, because again, the pattern of behavior is one that people will use as pejoratives. Again, people just don't use the term beta male as a pejorative. No, they also use the term nice guy. Now, the term nice guy is one that women use all the time to talk about guys that they don't like. And as part of their language, once they say the word nice guy, basically when a woman says the word nice guy, it's the kiss of death for that man, as related to her seeing him as attractive for relationships. When a woman uses the term nice guy, she basically is saying that she doesn't see that man as sexually attractive. She doesn't see that man as someone who is viable for a relationship. She's basically saying that when she sees a nice guy, that she sees a weak man. And the original term of nice is originally meant to be foolish. So she basically doesn't see this man as someone she takes seriously. But you don't see anybody going out here saying that nice guy is a pejorative. But nice guy is a term that women use to express their dislike for a man, and do it very quietly. Same thing with a woman using the term sweetie. Once a woman uses that term sweetie, she basically is saying that she does not see you as a man. No, she basically sees you in the role of a child. So any of these terms are used interchangeably, and they're used interchangeably to describe a man that she does not find to be in a leadership role. But when it comes to men, we cannot think about females' definitions of ourselves. No, we have to think about our definition of ourselves, and we cannot change the terms of words to please women. No, we need clear definitions because men are logical, and because men are logical, we need clear definitions of these terms so that we can identify individuals and their pattern of behavior, identify individuals and patterns of behavior to let people know that these individuals are out there. And again, a man is damaged by beta male behavior, and that's the logical progression because it's the dysfunctional way that a male is raised in Western society that leads to him becoming damaged. And he becomes damaged because he winds up being raised to see himself in the beta position, not the alpha position that God has given them as heads and stewards in society. That's the main reason why these guys are called beta males, because they do not know their role that God has given them as men to be heads of society and stewards as related to God's order. These men do not know their position as a man, and because they do not know their position as a man, they have been socially engineered to acquiesce to women and give women everything. But as they give women everything, what happens to these men is that they wind up losing the respect of those women, and those women wind up expressing their disdain for these men by calling them beta males, calling them nice guys, and even worse, nice guys and sweetie, because being called a nice guy or a sweetie means that that woman basically has no respect for you at all, no respect for you at all as a man, and doesn't see you as a man at all. Basically, she sees you in an infantilized, childlike role. So as a man, you need to understand what you're being called, because there are worse things to be called than a beta male. A beta male is just a clinical, psychological term to acknowledge the social engineered place that the rich want to put men in. And the whole thing is that many males out here don't understand why you're called a male, because a man is a clearly defined individual, who understands his one, that he was created by God, two, he was created to be in a role by God as a head and a steward, and who is accountable to God and is a part of God's order. That is what a man is. He is defined as someone who is ready to take that leadership role and provide structure for his household, and structure if he's in a leadership class as related to running a household and maintaining order. Again, maintaining order as related to making things accountable to God. That is the role of a man. A man understands his place in the world, but a male doesn't understand these things, because a male, yes, he's born male, but he doesn't understand his role as a man, and that's why we call them beta males, because one, they are submissive to women and put in a beta position under women, and two, they're called males because they are not men who understand their role in God's order, are not equipped to take that leadership role as a head and a steward. They are not ready to take on the role of a man, and that's why they're called beta males, because they don't know their role. They're submitted to women, and they're following a pattern and a paradigm that is going to lead to them winding up on a road of destructive behavior. Destructive behavior because they grow old and they don't grow up understanding their role as a man. And that's why the term beta male isn't a pejorative. No, it's a term to describe a pattern of behavior that can be broken out of with the help of licensed psychotherapists like Dr. Robert Glover, who runs the No More Mr. Nice Guy workshop to help men break out of this dysfunctional pattern that leads to men having an unsatisfying life. and reading books like The Man Crisis, which help you identify that behavior so you can work with someone like Dr. Robert Glover or work on your own towards breaking out of this pattern, or working with a group of men towards breaking out of this pattern so that you don't wind up being one of these kinder, gentler, softer males who is oftentimes winding up becoming an emotional individual who winds up acting on their impulses without critically thinking, and acts on their impulses in a way that winds up with them participating in behavior where they wind up not understanding that when a man participates in behavior, he has to deal with the consequences of his actions, because in a gynocentric society, the woman is never held accountable, but the man is held accountable for his behavior, and that's why he needs to think before he acts in society, because he's held accountable for his behavior, and he's held accountable by men and by God, because again, as the head, you are the one who is in charge of you, and you are in charge of things. So a man is held accountable for his behavior, and that's why we call them beta males, because again, they are, again, in this submissive position, don't understand these standards, and don't understand that you are accountable for yourself. So these males, again, the beta male doesn't understand these things. He just acts on feelings because he sees his single mother doing this. He gets emotional and thinks being emotional is a good thing, but emotions are very dangerous for a man to have if he cannot control them, because when a man, yes, you can feel, but you cannot go out here acting on your feelings, because acting on your feelings can lead to you being in a serious situation where you get jammed up, and wind up in a mess. And that's what many of these males don't understand. And again, changing the terms doesn't change the behavior, doesn't change the behavior as related to these individuals, doesn't change their behavior, doesn't change it at all. And we have to understand, if we want to change the behavior, we have to acknowledge the behavior. We have to acknowledge the behavior of these individuals in order to help them heal. That's why I call them beta males. And I call them beta males because that's the only way these individuals will understand to acknowledge the problems that they're having. Because the only way for this person to acknowledge their problems and acknowledge their behavior is to basically wind up dealing with that behavior and start moving a pattern forward. And the way we do this is by, again, not changing the definitions, but acknowledging that this person has this behavior issue, the same way we would if a person is bipolar. If they were schizophrenic, we have to acknowledge the behavior, and we have to acknowledge the behavior to hold these individuals accountable so that they can look to move themselves forward and move forward to become healthy men and not men in crisis. Now, if you want to learn more about the whole pattern of beta male behavior and why it's dysfunctional and how to break out of that pattern of dysfunctional behavior, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. And you can also find The Man Crisis at other online booksellers like Draft the Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. Now, I also talk about this dysfunctional pattern of behavior of softer males in my book, Manginas. They look like men, but they act like ladies. And you can find that ebook on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find that book at other online booksellers like Draft the Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and Target. And I also write other men's issues books that showcase this pattern of behavior in depth, like the Stop Simping, Why Men Don't Need Finance, Stop Simping in the Workplace, Stop Simping in Cyberspace. This behavior is extremely dysfunctional, and if it's all aspects of life, and I even have it in a book called Misadventures of Captain Save-'em, and all these books will help you get a better understanding of this pattern of behavior. Boys have been socially engineered to behave in and break out of that pattern to become more healthy men. And if you want to see me talk about men's issues in more videos like this one that was requested, you can send a donation for a minimum of $15 to the Cash App or the PayPal by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available on Lulu, John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes comic book. get your copy of the first John Haynes comic at lulu.com today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, The Temptation of John Haynes. Give in to temptation and pick up this action-packed African-American paranormal romance. Get The Temptation of John Haynes in paperback and e-readers today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.